Security used to not always be a partisan thing. You could go back a couple of decades ago and watch Democrat presidents on their State of the Union addresses speak about how we ought to secure our border, but somehow we've devolved into this partisan rhetoric on this issue. We look at our shoes. Some members in the House look at their shoes sometimes about why the border isn't secure. I'm comfortable with where my party sits on this. It is fortunate that Democrats and Republicans do agree at least on one thing in this hearing, that New York City absolutely does have a migrant crisis. But the way the two parties approach it today is vastly different. I'm a Navy man, so I can't resist but to use a couple of nautical analogies as I approach a problem. And I think that New York City's migrant crisis is like a ship taking on water. The migrant crisis, with 10,000 migrants coming to New York City every month and without the resources to shelter them, is like a ship taking on water. And to continue that analogy, and I don't mean to editorialize, and if the ranking member or anybody else disagrees, I'm happy to debate that, but the Democrat solution seems to be to build a bigger boat. That is to say that the Democrats want to throw more and more money and resources at the migrant crisis, to take over parkland, to build tent cities, and to have taxpayers rent hotels at taxpayer costs. And to pay for it, New York City officials are cutting from some of their own services, like fire department services, like police department services, and shifts and academy classes and whatnot. And the city officials who have adopted the sanctuary policies that have caused this crisis, they won't repeal them. Rather, they want our federal tax dollars to pay for their policy choices. And I'd like to analyze my party's solution to this, and further taking on that ship taking on water analogy. Our solution is to plug the hole through better policy choices and not to just throw more and more money at the situation. My colleagues and I, who sit on this side of the aisle, assert that this is a crisis of policy choice, that President Biden choosing to repeal the Remain in Mexico policy invites migrants to our country who will feign asylum, that their asylum claims won't ultimately approved. The number is somewhere between 60 and 80%, depending on which source you look at. The overwhelming majority of asylum claims ultimately will not be approved, and they'll be adjudicated 2 years later. That's a problem, and that's a policy choice. We assert that reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy would actually decrease the number of folks coming into our country who will feign that asylum, who will take advantage of those loopholes. And we also assert that repealing New York State's and New York City's sanctuary city policies, which prevent local law enforcement from enforcing our immigration laws, is a good thing and would help our crisis, because those sanctuary policies act as a magnet, drawing people across that border into cities who will not enforce federal immigration law. Mr. Iwata, thanks for being here today, sir. In your opening statement, you said that legislative paralysis is the main reason for our nation's border crisis and New York City's migrant crisis. Did I hear you correctly, sir?
I said it was the main reason for congressional inaction, yes.
Okay, so legislative paralysis, is that the reason, or a significant reason, in your opinion, sir, for this migrant crisis?
I think that it is part and parcel to the way in which the true source of problems that we're facing becomes congressional paralysis.
I appreciate the perspective. I obviously disagree. House Republican solution, or at least one solution to the migrant crisis and the border crisis, is H.R. 2. Are you familiar with H.R. 2, sir?
Yes.
Okay, in general, it would do a bunch of different things. It would help secure our border and disincentivize illegal immigration. You're a bit familiar with it?
Slightly, yes.
With respect to your term, legislative paralysis, do you know when H.R. 2 passed, sir?
I don't recall, but
May 12th, about 180 days ago, House Republicans took action with respect to policy on our border about 180 days ago, telling the world this is where we stand on immigration specifically, and the hallmark of it is reinstating Remain in Mexico. So using your term, legislative paralysis, has the United States Senate undertaken either H.R. 2 or anything else policy-wise related to border security?
Immigration reform is only going to be
yes
done
or no, sir?
by a bipartisanship
yes or no, sir?
way. And H.R. 2...
Reclaiming my time. I'll answer it for you. No.
No, they haven't.
The Senate, controlled by Democrats, has not done anything policy-wise. So if you're offering that legislative paralysis is part of the problem, I'd agree with that aspect. But maybe you go across the hall and tell those folks, undertake H.R. 2, at least debate it. Maybe it doesn't have the votes there. Maybe it does. Debate it and specifically address the Remain in Mexico policies that we believe will help secure our border. Mr. Chairman, I think we've made some progress here today. We obviously disagree on a lot, but having this conversation, bringing on our local officials is productive and informative to us so we can assert the right policy and budget choices. I yield, Mr. Chairman.